Barron is stable, Warren is still critical, and Palmer is missing. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 4, entitled Who Watches the Watchers? Written by Richard Manning and Hans Beimler, directed by Robert Weimer. This was October 14th, 1989. Where were you? Also, very special thanks to Chuck A for sponsoring this episode. Thank you very much, Chuck A. He's got the coolest
Chuck
plates in town.
What's up, everybody? I'm Cirroc Lofton from the Seventh Rule Podcast, and I'll be at STSF this year in the Bay Area, celebrating with our friends at Creation.
Okay. Cirroc's also from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You might recognize him from that. And my name is Ryan T. Husk of The Seventh Rule. You've got to go to this convention. It's March 8th through 10th, just south of San Francisco in Burlingame, right by the airport. You're going to love it. There are already well over 20 Star Trek and sci-fi guests, tons of panels. This is March 8th through 10th. CreationEnt.com. That's CreationEnt.com to get tickets and to get your hotel. We can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, I'll be there. Ryan will be there, and we'll represent the Seventh Rule Podcast
and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. How are you today, Cirroc?
I'm doing good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing really good. Thanks, real well. Here's the key, though. With this particular episode, and again, thanks, Chuck A. Interesting that you chose this one. We'll see if we can sift through this episode and figure out why you loved it so much. This is an episode that I remember the imagery. I remember those proto-Vulcans, like cave people Vulcans. I remember the makeup, and but I don't remember the storyline. So I wanted to ask you, but Vasquez Rocks was so cool. We got to talk about Vasquez Rocks.
No, that was Vasquez. Okay, that was one of my questions for you.
So much. But I wanted to ask you, what did you think of this episode, initially when you first started watching it, where you're like, okay, nothing's going on in this episode. It's going to be one of those thinkers. Or did it kind of dig deep on some interesting storylines?
Yeah, I think it's set up pretty well. I was interested to see, they were talking about studying these anthropologists studying the Mintaka people as proto-Vulcan humanoids. So I was interested to see how that was going to be conducted. I kind of felt like we were going to get into this story, so it was a little bit like, I was ready for it. And I knew that we were going to kind of have a Prime Directive type of episode.
They love their Prime Directive episodes, don't they?
Yeah, I just felt it. I was like, this is a Prime Directive episode. Anytime you see that village of people, you're like, how are they going to be able to interact with them without breaking the Prime Directive? And so that was pretty much, obvious to me in the beginning. And then some of the other things started to become interesting to me. I think going back to why Chuck liked this episode and wanted to sponsor this episode, I think it brought up some themes that I think are interesting to question when it comes to intelligence or intelligent life form meeting less intelligent life forms.
Yeah, and this is a theme. This is a theme that we've seen. And by we've seen, I mean we will be seeing more often in Star Trek The Next Generation. For example, the one that came immediately to mind, I don't remember, but everybody in the live chat and in the comments below, tell me which episode is this one with Ardra. Ardra and Feklar. I believe she turns into Feklar with all the drool all over the place. What episode was that? But anyway, what it is, the basic premise of, when what a Bronze Age society meets a futuristic society, they go, whoa, it must be gods. They must be magical. But no, it's just technology. It's just time has passed, and then there are a lot of theories out there too. A lot of people that, like the ancient aliens theories, where they say, hey, if 100,000 years ago, or even 5,000 years ago, humans were visited by aliens that are more technologically advanced than we are, we would have called them gods. There's some people that think, okay, Jesus and Moses, those are just aliens that had better technology to make seas part, or whatever it was. So who knows? Well, I don't know if we'll ever find out any kind of truth to any of those things, but that's what early life does. It's almost like the original scientists. They try to explain things that they're not equipped to explain. So they just start saying, oh, well, the reason that it rains is because I used my rain stick. This is the thing that makes the rain happen, or the way that we keep this volcano from exploding and destroying the villages. We have to sacrifice a little virgin girl. Obviously, that's the science of it. We figured, our top minds came together and figured this out, you guys. We got it. We nailed it. But what about the time she wasn't virgin enough?
Yeah. What I think is really interesting about this, because first of all, I felt like this is an episode that Gene Roddenberry really loves.
Mm-hmm.
And what made me think that is that he's really fascinated with the fundamental core beliefs inside of religious themes or religion in general. And those are the things that he's really trying to attack in some of his material. And what this reminds me of is the pilot episode with Q. And in that pilot episode, Q is the intelligent life form, or the more advanced life form, meeting with the Enterprise and their crew. So, and I think what is interesting, what makes it the opposite of this episode, is the pilot in this particular episode. What makes them opposites of each other is Q was spending the whole time trying to convince them that he was a god and why he was superior to them. And and why they were inferior, essentially, explaining it. And here was the Picard took the opposite approach. He was trying to say, I'm not a god.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, even though he was still saying what Q was essentially saying, which is, you are inferior to me in your development of technology, right? So you're like on the spectrum here on the timeline, you haven't advanced farther, and you can only show them the timeline preceding them. You can't show somebody a timeline that's in advance of their own ability to grasp, right? And conceive things. So that is what was really the central theme in this episode, is like, um, that Picard was trying to make this explanation and really making a distinction between himself and how Q, another advanced life form, would handle himself in that similar situation. We saw Q with more arrogance and bravado because he was that farther on in the evolutionary ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he had that kind of I'm better than you approach. And I felt like Picard in this was not doing the I'm better than you approach. He's saying, I come from you. I am you. We're not any different in that sense. We're just, more technologically advanced on that scale, on the linear kind of timeline. But that I thought made this episode interesting. And it also made me think, as I was watching it, how much Roddenberry would like tackling these particular themes in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Picard, he was very encouraging to the lady. And by the way, that was also, when she was up on the ship, that was also reminiscent. I don't know if reminiscent is the right word, but reminiscent of the movie First Contact, when he has what is her name? I can't remember her name right offhand. But he has a lady up and he's explaining how far, technologically advanced. He starts pointing down at the Solomon Islands and all that, which was fun. Um, and I guess it's not reminiscent if it's something that happens later on.
Before, yeah.
Yeah, so
That
it's
that
more like
that is reminiscent
foreshadowing
of
of it.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, God, it's killing me that I can't remember her name though. Something that ends with a Y. Anyway, but he was very encouraging to this lady when she says, "Do you think we will go out to the stars too someday?" And he says, "Of that, I have absolutely no doubt." And that was very nice and encouraging. So for me,
Yeah.
this episode was such a mixed bag because I liked what they did and I liked, how they portrayed Picard for the most part, you know, trying to do the right thing. But then there were other times where I was just kind of like, he doesn't need to like quiz her and be like, what do you think? Like he was talking to a 3-year-old. What do you think she would feel if she saw you? Well, she would probably, I'd be like, just tell me. I don't quiz me, don't pat me on the head. Don't, just I'm asking what's going on with you. Why don't you just say, "Hey, we were just like you, 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and we continued to build things, including this ship, and we are just like you, but further on." Oh, I get it. Well, you don't need to, you don't need to like walk her through every step. Just talk to her, man. I don't know. That part was a little weird. I get it. I understand that humans or proto-Vulcans probably grasp things better if they come to a conclusion when you walk them through it. But anyway, I was just kind of like, Picard, just tell her. You don't, this isn't
Yeah,
class.
that yeah, that's that. I had an issue with that a little bit too. Now that you say that, and I think my issue was these people um, they don't go to school, so they're not in the same. Um, they're not learning their history like that. They're not learning, what tools were developed. I don't think the Stone Age people said, "Oh, fire! I learned from that dude William that was born six 20,
Yeah, they don't know years.
150 years ago. There was a guy and he discovered the fire, and then another guy named Bill Hammer. He helped us invent this hammer so we can make the like
Yeah.
are they passing that knowledge down like that, uh, or is it written in books because there were no books at this point? So how is the most of the tradition is passed down orally, like they were talking about in this episode.
Yeah.
When they kept asking the wise man, well, wasn't it like, what didn't the overseer do this or didn't the overseer do that? So when you have a tradition that's passed down, it's people are talking. The old wise man is telling you what happened. I don't know that the particular nuances of, and then we used to live in the caves until we found fire and we were able to cook, and then are those stories passed down, or this is just kind of taken for granted? Hey, but hey, we wear clothes because some dude started wearing clothes a long time ago and now we're wearing clothes. Like how do they transmit that history,
Yeah, and I feel like that's different from our history. By the way, I looked up the character's name was Lily. I kept wanting to say Shelley. It was something like Shelley or Kelly. It was Lily, played by the Alfre Woodard. Uh,
Okay.
and great stuff, great scene there. But back to this. So I don't think that when we were Bronze Age, we had a grasp of that people used to live in caves. I don't think we were at that level, and the scientists, can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we pieced that stuff together way later, like
That's what I'm saying.
100 years
Yeah.
ago in our timeline. Now, if these guys were, let's say these guys are, what are they, 2,000 years ago according to
Yeah.
our timeline, or 5,000, were they really sciencing things? Were they, I mean, maybe, but that's the other thing is we're judging them based on our experience. Maybe these people, they're much more, like they said, they're much more rational and they have more of scientific mind. So, I was able to excuse that away based on what, they kind of dropped that little hint for us. But my immediate thought at first was like, whoa, these guys can't know all this stuff yet. But that's just
Yeah,
that's
and the
just
other
me.
thing I had an issue with was Nuria, who I thought did a great job of the
Yeah.
performance. It's my critique is more of the language that was used in that. I felt the language in the scene that was used between her and Picard was way too advanced for a primitive Bronze Age culture that's a hunter gatherer culture. She was like, well, the most logical scenario would be if I were to. It's like, whoa. Even formulating your sentences in that kind of a way seems really advanced. The most logical, or I would deduce this and deduce that. Like,
Mm.
um, to be able to speak like that in itself shows a level of education that I don't think these people would have had. So I think that the language itself was a little too advanced for me for this primitive culture. It would have been better if they were speaking in less uh, elaborate phraseology, in less
I
fragmented
completely agree
sentences.
with that. I was thinking the same so hard up in the ship when Picard was explaining to Nuria, the situation. And my first thought was, okay, so he has the universal translator. We get it, so they can
Right.
communicate. But she was speaking with basically a full vocabulary and I just don't I think that they would have 200 words or 500
Yes.
words. I don't think, but then
Yes.
I was again able to explain it away because
Like deduce, like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
deduce
they're
something,
not going to use the
or the
word
most
deduce.
logical or
Yeah, they're
reasonable.
living in huts
Park.
and caves and they're using words. But I was able to personally explain that away with the universal translator is translating it into,
Extrapolating.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
translating it into big words for us to understand. I was able to explain that in universe, but that was my first thought was like, you're talking to basically a
She
caveman.
had a Shakespeare accent, like Picard. The two of them were about to recite
They were
Shakespeare
doing a
together.
scene. Yeah, that's her scene
Yes.
partner.
And I was like, wait a minute, you can't have Shakespeare level vocabulary. You sound like the captain who's obviously been educated in all of this stuff and has years of knowledge, and you are literally, running out hunter gatherer. It just seems like it seems way too. I was a little bit off put by the language. I
Me too.
got the universal translator part. I just felt like the language was way too elaborate and extravagant for a prehistoric type of
Hmm.
civilization.
Yeah, but I loved the idea of this. I loved what they were doing and what they were teaching and what they were showing. And I had another qualm. And again, the reason I have these qualms is because they set up such a good story and such a good idea that it really makes me think. So it's kind of a weird compliment, but it set up such a good and interesting and accurate situation that then our scientific minds start to really go deeper into it. And one of the qualms I had with it, and this is just my own nitpick I guess, but they they said that it took them thousands of years to go from believing in gods and believing in fairy tales and believing in these kind of things to now living, with the rational, more of a scientific mind. It took them thousands of years, they said, to go from that to the other thing. So I felt like it wouldn't be so easy to flip them back into just immediately falling right back into religion and lore and mythology and fairy tales just like that. Now, this was a big major moment, but I figured that it is much more, much more likely that these thinkers that have left mythology behind, these rational scientific thinkers, have this guy and his daughter come back and say, we've seen this thing, it's blah, 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 that they would say, you're sick. You hit your head, it's a hallucination. They would try to figure it out. They would try to rationally figure it out. They wouldn't completely flip back into that's it, full scale religion, mythology, baptize me in the rocks. I just felt like that was the part where, and again, it's because they set up this situation that was so good. I was really with them, and then I start kind of trying to analyze it and understand it. But that was just my thinking, was that I don't think they would have reverted. I think it's more likely they would have tried to explain why those two people were saying the things that they were saying. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And that actually didn't sit 100% well with me when Picard had that speech about, they've abandoned their belief in the supernatural, how it took them thousands of years to abandon their belief in the supernatural. And you want me to send them back to the dark ages of superstition. This is what he says: the dark ages of superstition and ignorance and fear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my thing is that superstitions, ignorance, and fear is what led us out of the dark ages eventually. It still exists to this day. So all of the technology and every advancement was actually made during the existence of those things. And so superstitions and ignorance and fear led to the day where we're at right now, the point where we're at right now. I mean, there's all types of religious beliefs in the world. There's all type of ignorance in the world. There's all types of fear of the unknown in the world. And so
watch a baseball game if you want to see superstition.
Yeah.
Every single, they wear special socks.
And it's all around the world. And yet it hasn't hindered humanity's development and ingenuity and the advancements in technology. If anything, it may be a undercurrent or one of the driving forces behind it. People's fear of some terrible disaster, so they become ingenuity. They have some kind of ingenuity behind it. They may invent something that will deter some climate catastrophe or something to that nature because of their fear of it, right? Because
fear is the greatest motivator. It always has been. Yeah.
Right. And even ignorance, for example, when you look at the invention of the light bulb, ignorance of what it would take to be the filament that would become the incandescent light bulb, it was the ignorance that kept Edison driving forward. It was like, okay, it's not that, it's not this. I don't know what it is, but it's something. I got to find it. And so there's a level of ignorance there that keeps you driving forward, right? There's this, I have to figure it out. They also talk about the philosopher's stone. There's an ignorance behind the alchemy of turning base metals into gold, but that ignorance is what has driven scientists, philosophers to try to solve that puzzle of, what can I do to add an electron to a base metal to turn it to a gold? And so these are thoughts and processes that have driven the evolution of mankind more so than stifled it. And so that's why I kind of disagreed with that idea that superstition, ignorance, or fear is the definition of what it is to be in the dark ages.
That's really interesting, because I love the quote and I knew exactly what they were trying to say. And now you saying that, I'm like, I completely agree with that as well. Words are clumsy, and what the words that somebody's using to try to convey something is not going to necessarily be exactly what somebody receives when they hear that. And I think there was a lot of that in this episode. Some really good, interesting, smart, fun storytelling that gets our brains moving. Like my brain was moving. There was a lot of things.
Yeah.
But you know what? Let's
Yeah.
talk about this a bit more on the other side of our break. Super quick. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week. Not a ton. There was also no B-plot, now that I think about it. I mean, it kind of diverged a bit, but here we go. They are a 3-man Federation anthropological field team has been studying the inhabitants of Mintaka 3. The Mintakans are proto-Vulcan humanoids at the Bronze Age level. There is an anthropological outpost hiding inside Vasquez rocks. Martinez and his patient beam directly to sickbay. Baron is stable, Warren is still critical, and Palmer is missing. Commander Riker believes the Mintakans are a sensible race. That was fun because when Troi was telling him that the ladies decide how they're the ones that are negotiating for the men's services, and he goes, "What kind of services?" And she goes, "All of them." And he goes, "Ooh, they are a sensible race."
Yeah, I was like, God,
yeah,
he can't stop being horny.
Even when you have ugly ass makeup, you're still like, yeah, Mintakans. Let's do a little more than Mintakan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I heard that too. I was like, gosh, man, get your head out of the
get your head in the game, man.
Yeah, man, we got a mission to go through. We're trying to save some lives here.
Well, let's talk about a mission, an away mission we took with the Voyager documentary a year and a half back to Vasquez Rocks, because this entire episode reminded me of being at Vasquez Rocks, because they weren't. I was recognizing the exact locations. I was like, oh, we took a picture there. Oh, this was this. Oh, that's where Eve England was trying Funyuns for the first time and grimacing about it. You know, this is where I took a picture of TJ. You know, it was really fun to see. And then here was my question. Was when we saw Vasquez Rocks, and it was in the springtime, I think it was like April or May, there was hardly there were no shrubs. There was hardly any shrubbery up on the rocks, but
yeah,
there's a bunch of it here. So that makes me wonder. It's one of two things, I would think. Number one is the amount of foot traffic over the course of 30 years has killed what little shrubbery there was, or the set design people brought a bunch of shrubs and put them up in the rocks to kind of fill it out and color it up a bit. I don't know which one it is. I don't know if you got any inclinations on that.
I didn't even know for sure that it was Vasquez Rocks. So I was happy that when you confirmed that for me, because I've been there. It's like, oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
There were actually a couple other times I thought of you too, besides the set design, was the lady, Nuria, and the daughter's name was OG Ananobi, I believe, if I remember correctly. It was OG Ananobi. And
I wrote that down.
Yeah, I know you did, but I beat you to it.
You did.
The lady's name was Nuria, and I noticed when she was looking out at the planet. First of all, when she was up on the ship and she looks down and she goes, "That's my home," or "That's where I live," and he says, "Yes." I thought for sure she was going to say, "Huh, I imagined it flatter." I just thought that would have been hysterical if he goes, "Oh dear, we have a long way to go with you. You guys are beyond." Never mind. Drop them back and let's just get out of here. Anyway, I just thought it would be funny if she said, "Oh, I thought that, I thought it was gonna be flatter." But no, when she turned around, she had these two pigtails that were held together by like this metal clamp. And I don't know if you saw that. I had to pause it, but I thought of you because you usually have a good eye for these things. And I wasn't sure if I liked it or not. And I was hoping you were going to tell me, but I guess you catch it. It was a quick little shot, but it looked cool. It was I liked it because it was new. I've never seen two pigtails in the back with like a ring around each and a metal, it was like a barbell. So it's just like that's a whoever created that wardrobe thing is almost a prop, you know,
Yeah.
kudos to them for that creativity for because they always have to come up with something new and different.
Yeah, they do. I didn't see that, so I couldn't comment on that, but I could comment on the name OG because I did write that in my notes. I was like, "Hey, OG, there you go." Um, but I did like the the set that they built for the meeting spot where it looked like they were all gathered together in that kind of courtyard looking space. Um, I did like that. I thought that was pretty cool. Um, but some of the other things that I enjoyed though, like the sundial, I thought was really cool. They had that really cool prop in there in the middle of
Yep.
this. That was a nice touch. Um, we also got a few. We got a Nam, which I thought was interesting for me. And I know you caught it.
I didn't actually. I'm excited to hear this.
Oh yeah, we got a Nam for Dr. Pulaski, and
I
this is the
missed it.
first time. Yeah, this is the first time it was mentioned, and I thought, wow, they finally acknowledged that Dr. Pulaski was
It
there because
exists. I know they
yeah,
just completely they're like, we do not speak
it's
of
the
her.
fourth episode already, right?
Yeah. What did they say?
And they were asking, Picard was asking Crusher, Dr. Crusher, if she could erase the memory of the guy who fell down. And she says, I'm aware of Dr. Pulaski's method, but I'm not sure it's going to work on this, particular proto Vulcan humanoid type person.
Right.
So she did say she was aware of Dr. Pulaski's method. So for the first time, we got an acknowledgement of Dr. Pulaski, and it was by Dr. Crusher, which is even crazier that it's Crusher the one that is making the Nam. But I thought it was cool. It took them 4 episodes, but they finally mentioned her for the first time.
They finally acknowledged her existence, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They did. So that was good.
That was a good catch. Yeah, I missed that completely. I remember that conversation. I remember them saying that, but it didn't register when she said Pulaski. So that's a good one. I
Yeah.
also like to pause it and check out Picard's stunt double. That was fun.
Oh,
Um,
where was
when
that?
when he got
Where did
well, when
that
he got
happen?
shot with the arrow, like what's great about this is that I did not notice it when he got shot and fell. So they did a great job of just shooting it, hitting it, quick hits. We don't even notice it. But as soon as it happened afterwards, I was like, oh, there's got to be a stunt double there. Let me go back and check it. I was just curious. I was like, okay, obviously that's a stunt double move. I want to see if I can. I want to see if I can recognize and see his stunt double because he has a very different face. His stunt double. I recognize him. We've seen him a few times, and so I went back and kind of played it a little bit more frame by frame and pause it, and like, oh, there he is. There's his little face. So it was just nice to see him.
Yeah.
I also wondered if
Um,
Riker used a stunt double when he was carrying off that guy. Because if I'm a director, I don't want my lead carrying a 200-pound human through some rocks, like,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
so I was assuming that was him, but there was no way to tell because his back was to him, for most of those shots.
That was the other thing that kind of got to me in this episode slightly. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I guess this whole episode hinges upon that speech that Picard gives. And that is, he's not going to send them back into the dark ages because they've advanced or whatnot. And the reason I say it centers around that speech is because I feel the best way to have dealt with this particular thing would have been for Picard to essentially confirm their beliefs about him and he could have gotten exactly what he wanted without actually having to take her up aboard the ship and keep digging the hole even deeper and having them Troi be undercover and visit the planet surface with Riker looking like Romulans or Vulcans. It would have
Hmm.
been easier for them to. It would have been easier for Picard to say, "It is I, your Picard. Release, you release whoever it is, or just beam the guy out once they find him, and so yes, this group of people will believe that some godlike creature came in, did this or did that, and so would that really set them back that much? I mean, would they then not develop? That's the
Yeah,
part I don't get.
I think that they were saying basically that they don't want to stunt their growth. Like they've already grown past this, and this would revert them back. And I completely get that and agree with that. But again, this what this episode does is it creates a really good, interesting situation that gets you thinking, because it got me thinking that, like, well, it's not going to necessarily prevent them from going back to religion and superstition and fear. Uh, it's just going to come. It's just going to be a different kind. Now they're going to fear. They're going to tell stories 100 years from now. The people are going to be like, "We've heard stories of these magical beings that made things disappear. That said the old gods were the wrong way. This is the new gods, the New Testament. This is the right way." And they have these lasers. They make people disappear. They could make some people come back from the dead, but not others. And we're not really
Yeah.
sure what their
So you're making
criteria
it
is.
worse. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
You're creating a different
it's
lore, a
just
different.
creating a new religion. It's just a
Yeah,
different religion, because they're going to try to
exactly.
theorize. They're going to try to understand. They're going to tell their descendants,
And
and their
where their
descendants are going to say it, and
logical
it's going to
brain
change.
does not have the information to expand further,
Right.
that's where the mysticism and the story gets embellished, and the make believe part comes into play.
Yeah.
Say, so there's no.
There's no right
I don't
answer.
think there's no right answer in this particular situation. The other thing that kind of stood out to me also was Riker and Troi pop up in this little village of people, and they're like, "Yeah, we're the new, we're from across the way." What do you
Yeah.
mean you're from across the like? Where the fuck you guys been this whole time? You just pop up in the village like, "Oh yeah, we're two people who just popped up in the village and just wanted to ask a couple questions." And meanwhile, we're the most vocal out of everybody, and like in people's private space, like even in those days, I think people would have been territorial. I you look at the Native Americans; there were tribes that fought against each other, and they were like, "Hey, don't go over that mountain because that's not our mountain over
Yeah.
there."
Careful
Okay,
over there.
yeah. So even in those days, you could just pop up and be like, "Hey, what's up, guys? I'm just wandering around. You mind if I talk to the chief?"
And they look completely different. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean,
So
this
that
is
that
definitely,
wasn't believable either for me. That also was like a little bit over the top for me.
yeah, this is definitely something that has been explored many times, in Star Trek, these kind of things about, landing on a planet of, people that are well behind us. And then there's the magic and mysticism aspect, there's the prime directive aspect, there's the even in was it it was the second J.J. Abrams Kelvin universe movie. It's got a really cool first few minutes scene where I think Kirk and maybe Scotty or Kirk and Bones or something like that, they're running, and there's these aliens, they've got like this painted white skin, and they're acting all silly, and the aliens are chasing them, and they're running, and then the two guys, they jump and they're saved by the Enterprise, and they fly off, right?
Mhm.
But then the aliens, that because they don't want to have to ruin the prime directive, right? But the aliens go, whoa, and they see this. And so now suddenly they're creating a new religion. They're like in the sand, they're drawing a picture of the Enterprise, like so it gets explored a lot in Star Trek, is like
Mhm.
the responsibility of not interfering with the development of these species, because there's no right answer. It's like you could try to steer them this way, you could try to steer, but no matter what, you're going to alter their
Yeah,
trajectory.
no matter what. And
Mm.
then I thought it was unusual also to say, and by the way, there's the observatory deck where we've been watching you, and we will
I know
continue to
that
watch
was not like, now you're just
it.
rubbing salt in the wound or something. Or what was that? Just like a flex? Was that like a flex? By the way, we're so much better than you. We know everything you do. We've been watching you. We know what you're going to say. Don't even bother.
And we'll continue to be watching you.
Yeah.
Jordy, put it on disguise mode again. I thought that was like, whoa.
So here's a real quick artist rendition. It doesn't look like it's an exact screenshot. It's like an artist rendition of the
Yeah,
lady's two pigtails behind her. And you could see the two clamps there. But anyway, so it was
yeah.
like a clamp around one pigtail, clamp around another pigtail, and like a metal bar in between them. I don't know. I really like that. I just thought it was one of the more creative things we've seen. But we are coming close to the end here. So it's time for, what is this baseball? Well, you see, baseball is something we play in the future with a ball and a bat. So it is time for the home run of the episode. Who you got, Cirroc?
um, home run of this episode is going to go to. It's going to have to be Picard. Yeah, I thought Picard gave some of the best speeches in this episode. Whether I, you know, wholly agree with them or not is the different scenario. But the way they were delivered, I thought was excellent. Um, when he talks about to study you is to understand ourselves, I thought he delivered that well. Also, the scene where Picard says, "You must not kneel to me," and she says, "You do not wish it," and he says, "I do not deserve it." I thought that was a great scene for Picard. It showed some humility. It showed that he's not looking to be worshipped. In fact, he's trying to just, be logical and helpful. So overall, I think that Sir Patrick Stewart, gets the home run of this episode for me.
Mm-hmm. You know, another thing is, I kind of want to give this to the wardrobe department for that clamp that that I'm obsessed with. But also, I noticed, and I don't know if this is a negative, but I don't know if you caught this. Geordie's uniform had pleats, like in
No, I
the
didn't see that
front,
either.
in the chest, and I was like, wait, does anybody else? No, just Geordie's. He had two like pleats, and they almost look like sew lines, like it wasn't folded. They were like some kind of weird I don't know. I'd never seen that before. I don't think it's in any other episode, and I was just really surprised by it. So I'll have to find it again and get a picture.
Yeah.
But anyway, besides that, I think I want to give the home run of the day actually to the writers, because Hans Beimler and Richard Manning, because they gave us something that we could talk about for 3 hours. That we could
Yeah.
really. It's like, if you are coming up and with all these different ways and manifestations that this could go in a different direction, then I feel like they did a good job of setting up a story that interests us. So and there were some moments that did make me laugh, and some moments that I thought were cool and all that. So I'd like to. Oh, and Vasquez Rocks. So other home run goes to Vasquez Rocks itself.
Yeah.
That was awesome. All right, here are some other awesome people, starting with a guy that Cirroc and I were just talking about before we hit record. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne.
Homer.
Yeah, we love Homer. Dr. Anne Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin,
Arukin.
Titus Muller, we were talking about him too. Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anna Post, Anil O. Palat, Justine Norton-Kurtzen, Joe Balsarati, Mike Goo, DQ, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manisfee, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, Jed Thompson, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Grandpa One, that's Tim Baum, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, and of course, our pal, Jason Okun. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next, and we will be right back on the 7th Rule. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the 7th Rule. This is the free-for-all. Look who's here. We have Malissa Longo.
Hello.
Jason M. Okun. TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri has an Enterprise uniform that doesn't match the Enterprise he's sitting on. We have Carrie Schwent with a cool Ferengi Eyes shirt, sweater, and background. Allison Leach Hyde also has the Ferengi Eyes shirt. Check that out. We've got Marcia Classic Schreier. We have the listener, My Live in Tokyo. Faith Howell is also on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Anil O. Palat is outside of the Enterprise D. And Chris McGee has the radical Stembolt and Chill shirt. Let's get up into this. You guys, Cirroc caught the non-appearance mention, and I missed it. Is there a second one?
Did he say Pulaski?
That's the one, yeah. All right.
Finally.
Oh, and Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
Yeah. It was a little slow, but it was interesting. I'm going to go 7-1. But it's safe.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know? I'll give you a hint. To my knowledge, there is no NBA basketball player's height ever in the history of basketball that correlates to this one.
I'd go north of 8-1.
8-1, he says.
7-5. $1.
Anybody else? All right, all bets are in. It is an 8.0.
Wow.
Closest without going over is, wait, whoever said 7.5.
Neil.
Good job, Anil. All right. Let's get, but great guess, Jason. You nailed it. Malissa Longo, will you please get us started off on the right track?
Yes. I think it deserves to be up there in the 8s. I really enjoyed this episode a lot. Starting with the intro music in the very first shot. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So good. It grabbed me immediately. And then the how the music carried throughout the whole episode, it just gave the episode that sense of urgency that I feel like season 3 is doing really well with. Each episode, there's higher stakes, I feel like, in each episode of this season. And it's really fun to watch. I really like that this episode kind of was like an anthropological study in and of itself. I love it when episodes explore culture and different cultures and how these different cultures meet with the culture of the Enterprise and the Federation, and how they try and figure things out and work together to figure things out. There's so much I could say about this. It made me think about what our world would look like had the colonial people, when meeting the Native Americans, if they had tried to learn from each other instead of one trying to conquer the other, and then exchanging cultural differences and what would our world look like if we started that way instead of with bloodshed and slaughter and all of that stuff. So yeah, fascinating. I really loved this episode, and there's so much more I could say about it, but I'll let others speak as well. Vasquez rocks. Woohoo, yay. I'm so glad to see that. But yes, great episode in my point of view.
Cirroc and I didn't mention the music. That was something I really wanted to bring up in the very beginning of my notes. First 2 seconds, I was like, whoa, that music sounds freaking amazing.
Yes, yes.
Great stuff, Melissa. Thank you very much. Jason Okun is here. He's watching The Watchers. It's kind of meta. What do you think of this episode?
Well, I'll preface everything by saying it's actually one of my favorites of the entire series. So there you go. It's something that stuck with me from the first time I watched it. And when you see an episode that really works, and I may be saying this a lot in the third season, and kind of going forward, it's like listening to a beautiful orchestra where everything works. It's not just isolated instruments; everything works. I mean, certainly speaking, Melissa, speaking of music, it grabs you, and this, a lot of the music in Next Gen, especially later, will be like wallpaper. I mean, that's what basically I'll say the producers, but there are a couple of people who are sort of responsible for the way the music sounded, and for Ron Jones's departure. This is certainly not wallpaper. It sets the mood. It enhances the mood, and especially the music when Nuria is on the Enterprise and she's discovering this wondrous world. And there's certainly great themes here. It basically shows you where a religion or myths or superstitions come from, how they're perpetuated, and how they can quickly devolve into violence and whatever else it is. And even logical and reasonable people can succumb to that. And we should be mindful of how this all develops. So that's on the story side. It's certainly, I think it's wonderfully acted, and everybody, I mean, obviously Will Wheaton is not in this episode, but every other actor had something to do in here.
Mm-hmm.
Some more, some less. And I think, I really liked, for the most part, the guest cast. The way this was described in the script, that they're supposed to be sort of like Vulcans, not as unemotional, but certainly more controlled. And I think it was performed very well. I think it was directed pretty well. Some of the bridge scenes were a little static, and the Enterprise scenes, but once you get on location, once you get to Vasquez Rocks, I think the whole palette opens up. You can you can really sort of have the more kind of cinematic feel to it simply because you're outside. I think Marvin did a wonderful job lighting. Even the stuff done indoors. I think it was wonderfully lit. So a lot of things are working very well together. I mean, you can always nitpick everything, and you'll leave some of the stuff for later. I mean, again, there may have been a little bit of a script polish that this could have used. Certainly not as much as others. But I think it's a wonderful episode. I always enjoy watching it, even though, Cirroc, I think you're right. It may be a little slower than some others, but I think it works on many different levels.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jason Okun. TJ Jackson Bay is out in Missouri. He's celebrating the Grizzlies coming back to life. What do you think of this episode?
I enjoyed this episode very much. I always have. Excuse me, as well. But as I was watching it this time, I found myself, kind of questioning Picard's initial reaction to the situation when Dr. Crusher beams Liko aboard, and he's like, why don't you just let him, die? And I'm like, come on, Picard, let's go, man. Especially since, he'd already seen everything. And so, I mean, they went very fast from, oh my God, they're aliens, to alien abduction, to, let's make this guy a god, this Picard guy. And so, I've also thought, I think somebody, I think it was Melissa, mentioned, how the episode itself was actually also, kind of a study of how, people react to the unknown and what's not understood. And in this case, they begin trying to, suss out, what some supernatural, distant uh, power wanted from them. And unfortunately, the one guy was just determined to make it violence. Let's tie this Palmer guy up. Let's shoot Troi so that we can please this thing that hasn't even talked to us. Which is, I think kind of an interesting reaction and really something that we actually do see out in the world, which is maybe could use a different approach like we saw in this episode. So, that's what I have to say about that. I did notice one thing, and I wonder if anybody else caught it. When they get Palmer aboard, there's a nurse in one of the old uniforms. I'm like, what is this guy?
Good catch.
He didn't get the memo. So go back and catch that if you didn't see it. I'll have more later.
It's a good catch. I didn't see that. Thanks very much. TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri. Carrie Schwent, what's up? You got a lot of eyes hanging out with you. What's the word? What'd you think of this one?
I don't know. I feel like someone's always watching me, just like that old song says. The first image that popped into my head, like, what kind of background should I go with? I just saw these eyes.
Goes with your shirt.
Exactly. Yeah, I really, really like this one. Like EJ, I was a bit irritated with Picard at first. Like, okay, way to overreact, dude. But the way he handled all of everything with Nuria when she came up to the ship, my respect for Picard went up several notches. He handled that so well, even when he saw that she was still not quite getting it the way he wanted her to get it. He handled that very, very well, and I liked that. I love all of the guest stars. The guy playing Liko in particular, I've been a fan of his for a while from a couple things. He was also in the Gilmore Girls revival, and he just has one of those really cool voices. My favorite thing though was Troi and Riker when they go undercover, when they beam down. I love their outfits. Troi in particular, I want that dress. She looked very cool in that. And their whole banter when she's talking about how their society, like the women walks first behind them. I loved that whole exchange. It was hysterical. And later on, when they're trying to talk to Troi about trying to figure out which one of the people around her is Nuria, and her just trying to be super subtle about, and Data's confusion. That was comedy gold. It makes me laugh every single time I watch that episode. And because my voice sucks, thank you, COVID, I sent Malissa my limerick for the episode, and she's going to read it for me. I'll give a brief intro for it. Like, people make mistakes, but learning how to clean it up afterwards is you'll learn for next time. So, Malissa, if you please.
Yes. Fixing mistakes can be a tricky thing. Often it's a bell you cannot unring. It fills you with dread, but works out in the end. Now next time, no harm will you bring.
Thank you, Malissa.
Great stuff from the tag team, Carrie and Malissa. Thank you very much for that. Marsha Classic Schreier is here, everybody. What's up, Marsha? Is this your favorite episode of season 3?
Maybe not my favorite, but one of my favorites. I really liked this episode. And it goes back to something I said a couple of weeks ago, where in season 3, we just start seeing real acting and realism, how people would act, not the stilted robots of season 1 and 2 to some point. And it starts right in the teaser when everybody on the bridge is watching as people are appearing on the surface of the planet. And the look on Picard's face says it all. He doesn't need to say anything except warp 9, you know? I was like, wow, that's really good. And like Carrie, I really love his acting and the whole scene, his interaction with Noria in the huts versus caves scene. I thought that was brilliant, you know, and he's not shouting, he's not, you know, overacting. He's explaining as a teacher would, rather than this god that they think he all is. So I loved that. I also liked I thought the line, "Then why don't you let him die?" as horrible as it is, was so well delivered. Again, the acting was just great. What I didn't like was he's so fixated on the Prime Directive and how important it is, and we later learn that he, not as bad as Kirk, but he disregards or stretches the limits of the Prime Directive on many occasions. So it's not so much a rule, a rigid rule. It's a guideline, and that's how it should be treated. But it was good to see him realize that the Prime Directive had to be counseled, or he had to use it to counsel them, rather than saying, nope, this is it. You know, we're not doing anything. And there was good interaction between him and, I forgot his name, the head of the scientists on the planet, who were saying the Prime Directive has already been violated. Let's try to control and learn from it. I used to have a saying that I actually put on a T-shirt: if you're not going to learn from your mistakes, don't make any. So I think they do learn from their mistakes by the end of this episode and in future episodes. And one more thing, I love the guest actors, Ray Wise, who I liked from Twin Peaks.
Oh, that was him. Cool.
That was him.
Yep.
And Catherine Lee Scott, who played Maria from Dark Shadows. That probably goes back before most of you were born. But and I'll keep the rest till later. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Marcia. Classic Schreier. Mai is live in Tokyo with some colorful Venn diagrams or something. What's up, Mai?
Good catch. Those are Venn diagrams. They're part of what I want to talk about. Exactly what they are. Starting out with a quote, horrifying. Dr. Barron, your report describes how rational these people are. Millennia ago, they abandoned their belief in the supernatural. Now you're asking me to sabotage that achievement? To send them back into the dark ages of superstition and ignorance and fear? No. Well, contrasting that, Dei Filius was a document that came from the First Vatican Council for Roman Catholics. It was adopted unanimously in 1870. It states that not only can faith and reason never be opposed to one another, but they are of mutual aid to one another. And I know a lot of very intelligent people who I would naturally describe as reasoned thinkers. I also know a large number of people of faith. One of my favorite philosophers is Etienne Gilson. The intersection of these two sets of people is bigger than the non-intersecting portion, which is why I've got these Venn diagrams here, because where people who are reasonable thinkers and just happen to be people of faith as well, to me, they comprise the greatest number of people out there. So this episode, more than being about the Prime Directive or evolution or social norms, it makes me uncomfortable for its statement that religious belief is less advanced than science. And I mean, wasn't it science that taught us that the world was flat initially, or that bloodletting cured people, or that bathing is how people got sick? To me, it seems wildly out of character with the Star Trek mantra of acceptance espoused in IDIC to not only be thematically critical of faith, but to be vocally critical, as Picard was. And this episode, I'm hearing a lot of praise. I think 8 is way too high for it. I love the pre-Vulcan or Vulcan-like society, but it seems to create an artificial strata of evolution based on the opinion of one small group. So for me, don't just say live and let live. Encourage it at every turn. Sorry, guys.
Great stuff. Thanks very much. My live in Tokyo, kind of similar to what Cirroc and I were saying, especially in that first segment. Had a lot of fun discussing that kind of stuff. Really, really good philosophy and whatnot. Theories. One faith we do love is Faith Howell. What's up, Faith? What'd you think of this episode?
I have always really liked this episode, and I don't know if it was the dresses. I always love when we're out of our regular uniforms. It's so much fun to just see where the creativity goes. And I know this is a lot of sort of traditional human style clothing. They didn't get too crazy with this one, but I really like big dresses, so that was appealing. I also think I really like this episode because it matches sort of what I've been taught as a teacher about the learning process. You can see how the one guy, somebody give me his name real quick, goes through how he goes through he has the new information and he tries to fit it into his schema of understanding how the world works. And he adds to that as he goes along and tests it right on up until the end when he shoots Picard. And so I like that they pushed it that far. I'm sorry, poor Picard had to get shot to prove this guy was wrong, but that is how it is teaching sometimes. You really have to break someone out of their thought process. You have to run out of any other possible explanation sometimes. So I thought that was an interesting model. I also really like how, shall we say, this mirrors our own culture. If you flip it the other way, it made me think about if we today are these people being observed, how would this superior culture really cloak themselves? How would they hide from us? And it would mirror alien abduction, right? So that would be the only option, would be to either remove or kill these people once the information is out. How else do you keep it from the information from spreading? So I think that was interesting. And I think they could have, if they had had more time, could have put more commentary into that on, what options do we have now that these people know, and how is it going to impact the larger community? Or is this going to have to be an insular society that can't let that information out? Or what else? What impact does this have on the rest of the planet?
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Faith. Told you we loved her. Anil O. Palat is here. It's so good to have you back, Anil. What's up? What'd you think of this one?
Thank you. Yeah, I really like this episode. I think it's a gateway episode. So like if you want to introduce Star Trek to somebody, I feel like this one is a really good entry into TNG, but also Star Trek in general, because you have the whole cast involved. You have a really interesting sort of sci-fi question, and it's probably the best episode, or one of the best episodes, that makes the Prime Directive pretty clear. Like, there are episodes where it's sort of, questionable, or we don't know what it is or if it applies. But I think, the Federation is so much more advanced than this culture. There's clearly a reason why they shouldn't, interfere or let themselves be known, because it would totally, change the course of an entire planet. There's a good Enterprise episode that kind of covers that as well, where you see why they learn, not to interfere with cultures, even just letting them know. So I think it's a really good way to kind of demonstrate this is why they keep their distance, but also, they don't, right, at the same time, right? They could observe them from space. They're pretty close. they're and so they sort of set themselves up, and I don't think they learned their lesson in the future. I'm pretty sure they keep doing this But yeah, I think it's a great gateway episode into Star Trek.
Good stuff. Making Star Trek sound like a drug. I love it. Just got me thinking of all the good episodes that are good gateway episodes. There's so many good ones. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Anil. The Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here. What do you think of this one?
Oh, I can't lie. This is probably one of my favorites, maybe even in the top 10 of the Next Generation. Not sure, but close at least. I mean, sure, it's another Prime Directive episode. I mean, it's certainly not the first one we've had, and it won't be the last. But I think it has great drama surrounding the central idea of questioning superstition and theology. I definitely look forward to the inevitable discussion and things left unsaid, especially since probably one of Mai's reasonable thinkers. Regarding Mitaken's seeing the Picard as a god, I can't help but think that maybe the writers were subtly poking fun at the fact that many Star Trek fans have a tendency to deify captains like Kirk and Picard. As Marcia had mentioned, great to see Ray Wise again, who plays Liko, playing the role he does best, which is an impulsive and strongly opinionated man. Of course, as mentioned, he does play in Twin Peaks as Leland. Wait for it, Palmer.
Oh.
And finally, the Mitaken gift that Picard receives at the end of this episode is the first of several he's going to be accumulating, and which will adorn his quarters in future episodes and movies. So keep an eye out for that. Finally, the memorable quote of the episode. I think everyone has been alluding to it, so I'll just say it out loud. They are a sensible race.
Excellent. Good stuff. That was William T. Riker. Thank you very much. Chris McGee. Allison Leach Hyde is here. What's up, Allison? What did you think of this particular episode?
I like this episode a lot. I like that it's all the crew members are doing things that make sense for their rank, for their position on the ship. Really like Troi in this episode. She's having a great time teasing Riker and being in the thick of an away mission where she gets to do something, not just stand there and feel. She's active. So I love her in this episode. I also really like that Picard is like, this is the Prime Directive. This is how I'm going to do this. I don't care if I get shot. Like, no, this is what's going on. I'm like, okay, we gave him a very strong personality, and he isn't yelling and trying to teach at the same time. So I thought his character growth was actually seen a lot in this episode, which I very much appreciated. And as for Jonathan Frakes, he got a special understanding of what Michael Dorn goes through. So he could not handle having the makeup and was very happy he got to be his normal face on this one. So I have a favorite quote from this one too, and it is, "You are a miraculous people, but you are not superior beings." I thought that was kind of the lesson of the episode. And it gave me hope for what we can be in the future. So.
Oh, yeah. Bronze Age Proto-Vulcans. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Allison Leach Hyde. It's time for Jake's final take. Here we go. Any final thoughts on this one, Cirroc?
I was thinking about this Vulcan race, and I was thinking, like, wouldn't the Vulcans be studying the prehistoric Vulcans to learn about their own ancestry and perhaps their own origin? It seems like that would be because the Vulcans do exist in this timeline, right? They have already the advanced versions of the Vulcans exist at this point.
There's some on the Enterprise, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I would have liked to know exactly how a prehistoric version of a Vulcan ends up somewhere on the other side of the galaxy. Like I would like a little bit of explanation, because that doesn't sit with me exactly. How did that happen? how did these Vulcans or pre-Vulcans, or if we found, for example, prehistoric or some kind of original Cro-Magnon, yeah, some kind of on another planet, I would wonder how they actually arrived there. That would be more of the study to me than how they behave in a caveman type environment. But needless to say, that was one of my questions. I wanted to bring up the name Mintaka. It was called Mintaka 3. Mintaka, from my understanding, is somewhere in the Orion's belt. And so that was one of the reasons they used that name. Also wanted to say that the Watchers, the Book of the Watchers, is actually also known as the Book of Enoch, and it's part of the Old Testament Apocrypha. So it is a 3rd century manuscript that is not included in the Old Testament, but is referred to often. It is the Book of Enoch. It does refer to the Watchers in that book. And in that Book of Enoch, discusses how Enoch is tasked with getting rid of the Watchers. So I thought it was interesting that they used that phraseology. It's also who watches the Watchers comes from Latin phrase. And I would think that the mime knows more about this than me because of your extensive Latin history. But so yeah, the who watches the Watchers phrase itself comes from Latin manuscripts. So a lot of the historical stuff I like to dive into where the writers are when they're coming up with this stuff, like where are their reference points. And I do believe that this episode, like as I said in the review, would have resonated a lot with Gene Roddenberry because a lot of his belief system seemed to be portrayed or resonates to me in this script. And that's where I feel like the speech that Picard gives about superstition and ignorance and fear almost lends itself to Roddenberry's perception of the world and religion. So I thought that was interesting as well. The other thing I thought was noticeable was that Picard, just like Captain Sisko, does not want to be a god and does not want to be worshipped by people. Sisko was reluctant to accept that. He didn't want that moniker. He didn't want to be the emissary. He was reluctant about that. And Picard's natural inclination was also to resist this kind of praise, this godlike, label on him. So I thought that was also interesting as well. But yeah, that's pretty much most of what I have. We'll leave the other stuff for the things left unsaid.
Yeah, still way more to talk about. Oh my goodness. There's way too much with this episode. But that's for everybody that is a patron or backer of our show. So please go to patreon.com/the7th rule and maybe jump on and have some fun with us. Also, please give this video a like or subscribe to the channel. If you're listening in, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate it. But besides all that, we sure had fun with all y'all. Thanks very much for hanging out with us. Allison, Chris, Anil, Faith, Mai, Marsha, Carrie, TJ, Jason, Melissa. For myself, Cirroc Lofton, Aaron Eisenberg, Malissa Longo, thank you all very much for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time. And until then, always remember. That was a nice delay, right? The 7th rule.